Have you ever seen a bird do something strange and couldn't explain it? Perhaps it was that moment when you looked out the window and saw a sparrow stretched out on the ground, wings spread, completely still, as if it were dead. And you just stared, uncomprehending. Then it got up and flew away, as if nothing had happened. Perhaps it was a crow you watched preening its plumage repeatedly, with an almost ritualistic method. Or the whole flock of small birds that suddenly swooped down on a much larger hawk, attacking fearlessly, without apparent logic, without any real chance of winning. Or that song that began before dawn, in complete darkness, when no other living being seemed to be awake, and which grew more intense until the sun appeared. You saw it, but you didn't understand. And the explanation that likely emerged was simple: a reflex, an automatic instinct, a mechanical behavior without depth, without layers, without history. Something birds do because they've been programmed to do it. This explanation is completely wrong. What lies behind each of these behaviors you've observed is a combination of sophisticated biology, conscious social strategy, sensory perception that goes beyond our comprehension, and a connection to forces that humans have tried to decipher for millennia. They are not reflexes. They are languages. They are rituals. They are responses to a world that birds perceive with a depth that our senses will never reach. And every time you saw a bird do something that seemed strange, you were witnessing a fragment of that world without knowing you were witnessing it. Today you will understand what you were seeing. Welcome to Wild Mindset, the channel that exists to answer the questions you forgot to ask. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because what we publish here every week is the kind of knowledge that changes how you perceive the world around you. Turn on notifications and stay until the end of this video. Because the last point isn't just about birds. It's about you, about human beings, about a relationship between our species and birds that is tens of thousands of years old and that you had never considered from this perspective. It's the point that changes everything. Let's begin. There is a crow. Let's talk about it. Not a generic, abstract, representative raven. A specific raven, male, adult, that lives on the outskirts of a temperate forest in northern Europe. A creature that weighs just over a kilogram, that has eyes that process color and detail with resolution superior to that of humans, that has documented episodic memory, and that is capable of planning actions for the immediate future in ways that until recently science attributed exclusively to primates. One afternoon, you might have seen this crow do something that would seem disturbing if you didn't know what you were seeing. It landed on the ground next to an active anthill. It picked up ants with its beak, and it began rubbing these ants on its own feathers, methodically, covering the area of its wings, chest, and back, passing the live insects over its plumage with a precision that is anything but accidental. Then it dropped the ants on the ground and stood still for a few seconds, its wings slightly open, as if absorbing something. The behavior is called tingling, and it is one of the oldest, most documented, and most poorly understood avian behaviors that exist. What the crow was doing wasn't madness. It was pharmacology. When threatened, ants release formic acid, a chemical compound with significant antimicrobial and antiparasitic properties. When a crow rubs live ants on its plumage, it is applying this acid directly to its skin and feathers, where mites, bacteria, and fungi live. It is a precise chemical treatment, used by more than 200 documented bird species on every continent, that evolutionary biology has taken millions of years to refine. But here's the part that goes beyond biology. Neuroimaging studies in corvids have shown that during tingling, the brain's reward circuits are activated. Formic acid in contact with the skin produces a sensation that the bird's nervous system processes as pleasurable. It's not just hygiene. It's a ritual that has a sensory dimension, a dimension of well-being, which the bird actively seeks when the environment allows. The crow is not just treating itself. It is, within the limits of what neuroscience can responsibly affirm, feeling something. And he returns to the same anthill, at the same time, with the same method, week after week, like someone returning to a familiar place, like someone who has practiced. But the crow doesn't act alone in the world. And when the flock enters the equation, the behavior you saw and didn't understand becomes even more surprising. You've probably seen this happen before. A group of small birds, swallows, thrushes, even sparrows, diving toward a much larger predator. An owl, a hawk, sometimes even a cat on a roof. The smaller ones screaming, diving, touching the predator with their wings, moving away and returning. A seemingly suicidal, irrational, biologically illogical battle. Why would a creature weighing 40 grams attack another that weighs 40 times more? The answer most people give is the instinct to protect their offspring. And that answer is partially correct. But it's the least interesting part of the story. This behavior is called mobbing. And the scientific data about it reveals a social dimension that completely transforms what you were seeing. First, mobbing is culturally transmitted between generations. Young birds that observe adults mobbing a specific predator learn to recognize that predator as a threat even without ever having had direct contact with it. It's not instinct. It's social learning. It's knowledge passed from one generation to the next through observation and participation in collective behavior. In functional terms, it's tradition. Second, mobbing creates reputation. Studies with crows have shown that individuals who actively participate in mobbing are observed by other group members and have elevated social status after the event. The bird that dived deeper, that got closer to the predator, that screamed loudest, is the one that receives more social attention in the following hours. The risk is an investment in position within the hierarchy. Third, mobbing functions as a living map of danger. When a bird starts its mobbing call, birds of other species, from other trees, from surprising distances, recognize the signal and converge. They have created a collective defense system that transcends species boundaries. A coalition formed the moment danger appears, dissolved when it passes, immediately reactivated at the next threat. What you saw as irrational chaos was, in fact, democracy in action. A democracy that has no parliament, no constitution, no species borders. It only has the cry that says, "Here. Now. Everyone." And at the exact moment when the danger passes, when the predator leaves and silence returns, what these birds perceive of their surrounding environment is something you could never fully imagine because you don't have the sensory equipment for it. Their world is not your world. It's the same physical space, but perceived through such different instruments that it seems like another planet. It starts with vision. A bird's retina contains 4 types of photoreceptors, whereas yours contains 3. The 4th type is sensitive to ultraviolet light. This means that surfaces that appear uniform to you, a green leaf, a feather, a moss-covered branch, display patterns of contrast, texture, and signaling that are completely invisible to your eyes. The ultraviolet markings on the feathers of a male finch are, for the female evaluating him, equivalent to a detailed resume of health, genetics, and physical condition. You see a yellow bird. She sees a complete story. Then comes the sound. A bird's auditory temporal resolution is up to 10 times greater than a human's. What you hear is a single song. They hear as a sequence of up to 10 distinct notes separated by intervals that our ears merge into a single tone. This means that the complexity of sound communication between birds is, in practice, a language with a grammar that our auditory physiology simply cannot decode in real time. We are hearing a conversation that is too fast to be understood with the ears we have. And then comes what is most difficult to explain, the magnetic sense. The ability to perceive the Earth's magnetic field as active sensory information, not as an abstraction, but as something that integrates continuously into the perception of space. For a bird equipped with cryptochromes in its eyes, the environment is never just what is visible. There is an additional layer of geomagnetic information that guides, anchors, and connects each point in space to its relative position on the planet. The backyard you see is a flat surface with plants and birds. For them, it's a node in an information network that extends to the poles. But of all the behaviors you've seen and not understood, there's one that's the most poorly explained of all. The one you heard about before you saw it. The one that begins in the dark, when there should be no reason for it to begin at all. The dawn chorus. Before the sun appears, when the sky is still dark and the temperature is at its lowest point of the night, the birds begin to sing. Not timidly, intensely, with an energy that seems disproportionate for a being that has just emerged from hours of metabolic torpor. And the explanation you've probably heard is the simplest possible. They are greeting the dawn, singing with joy at the arrival of day. A beautiful metaphor that popular culture has repeated so many times that it has become common sense. That's completely wrong. The dawn chorus is one of the most sophisticated forms of high-quality information communication that nature has produced, and the key to understanding it lies in acoustics. In the moments before dawn, before the morning wind begins, before human noise intensifies, before insects awaken and add their own sound to the environment, the acoustic conditions are the best of the entire day. Sound travels farther. Sound travels with less distortion. Sound reaches its recipient with greater fidelity than at any other time in the next 24 hours. And birds, whose auditory systems have evolved to extract maximum information from minimal signal, know this. Biologically, instinctively, ancestrally, they know this. The chorus of dawn is not joy. It's strategy. Each male singing at this moment is transmitting, with the maximum coverage and fidelity possible, a message that says, I am here. I survived the night. My territory remains mine. My health is sufficient to expend energy on this song when most are still awake. Females within the range of this song are evaluating the complexity, volume, and variety of notes, all indicators of genetic fitness, experience, and immune condition. The male that sings earlier, louder, and with more variation is not happier. He is healthier. He is competing with the only instrument that the environment offers with maximum efficiency at that moment. The beauty you heard about was a battle, and you didn't know it. And now, expand everything. Leave the backyard. Leave the city. Go back in time. 35,000 years ago, in a cave in Lascaux, in what is now southern France, a human being drew a bird on the stone wall, next to a bison, next to horses, amidst one of the oldest collections of cave art that our species has left in the world. A bird, at the beginning of everything. And it wasn't a coincidence. It was standard practice. In every human culture that archaeology has been able to study, all of them, without geographical or temporal exception, birds occupy a special place in cosmology, religion, and the interpretation of the world. The Greeks practiced ornithomancy, reading the signs in the flights and songs of birds as a way to access knowledge about the future. Roman augury, the practice of interpreting bird behavior before military and political decisions, was so institutionalized that there were specialized priests called augurs, and the very name of the profession survived in the English language as augur, one who foretells. The Celts saw ravens as messengers between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The Aztecs built an entire cosmology around Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the being that unites what crawls with what flies, the earth with the sky. Australian Aborigines still maintain systems of ecological knowledge transmitted through stories about birds that describe behaviors so precisely that contemporary researchers use them as valid scientific data. Why? Why is it that everywhere, at all times, in every culture, humankind has looked at birds and seen something that goes beyond the animal itself? The answer may be more literal than it seems. Humans who survived long enough to pass on their genes during hundreds of thousands of years of life in wild environments were those who learned to read animal behavior as information about the environment. A bird that suddenly stops singing is a sign of a nearby predator. The flight of certain birds in specific directions points to water sources. The behavior of crows and other scavenging birds signals the presence of dead animals that may be a food source. The intense dawn chorus indicates that the night has passed without major threats in the area. Reading birds wasn't superstition. It was field science. It was reading data in real time, using the bird as a sensor of the environment, as an interface between humans and a world that was too vast to be directly monitored. Ornithomancy didn't arise from ignorance. It arose from a genuinely useful practice that, over time, was formalized, ritualized, and eventually disconnected from the ecological basis that generated it. The bird has always been a window, not to the supernatural, to the real, to what exists but is not directly visible, to what pulsates beyond the reach of human senses, but which a being with 4 types of photoreceptors, 10 times greater auditory resolution, and a quantum compass in its eyes can perceive and translate into behavior. When your ancestors watched a bird in flight and tried to extract meaning from that movement, they weren't being naive. In their own way, they were doing the same thing you're doing now, trying to understand what's happening beyond what they can see. Go back to the beginning, to that initial scene. The bird doing something you didn't understand. Now you understand a little more. Not everything, Science doesn't understand everything yet. And perhaps it never will completely, because the world that birds inhabit is far more complex than ours, that the distance between our perception and theirs may never be fully bridged. But now you know that what seemed strange had logic, that what seemed random had structure, that what seemed simple had layers ranging from the biochemistry of formic acid in a feather to the quantum physics of a protein in the eyes of a being weighing less than a kilogram, that is, at this very moment, reading the Earth's magnetic field while deciding where to fly. And perhaps what this awareness produces is not just curiosity. Perhaps it produces something more like respect, with the feeling that sharing the planet with these beings is a privilege that everyday normality has made us forget to value. Their ancestors didn't forget. They stopped. They looked. They paid attention to what the bird was doing because they knew, in a way that was perhaps more intuitive than scientific, but no less real, that the bird knew something they didn't. You know that now too. So here's the question I need you to bring to the comments today. What's the strangest bird behavior you've ever observed that you could never explain? What did you see? Where was it? How did you feel at that moment? Tell us in the comments. Because the stories that appear here every time we ask this question are, in themselves, a window to something worth seeing. If this video opened a door for you, share it with someone who also stops to look at the sky sometimes. And if you're not yet subscribed to Wild Mindset, you know what to do. The next video is coming soon, and it goes even deeper.